Hey everyone, it's Josh Spilker from AirOps, content and SEO lead here. So happy you're joining us today for another round of our Growth Leader series. We've got Eli Schwartz with us today. How are you doing, Eli?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to always be with you on these AirOps webinars.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the time. It's always really fun. As we have people trickling in, you were telling me a little bit beforehand, but you've been in Atlanta, you've been in Boston. You were at SMX Advanced, right?
I accidentally did not go to SMX
Oh,
Advanced.
okay.
I went to the masterminds the day before. I did a mastermind on will AI kill SEO. I didn't realize that I was coming in the day before. I thought I was coming in day one of the conference, but couldn't switch my travel once I figured out that mistake.
Yeah. Well, great time, I hope. Anyway, well, one thing I wanted to let everyone know about is if this is your first time, we're so happy you're here. This is drop a star in the chat if this is your first time here. And if you have been on an AirOps webinar, been an attendee before, let me see a rocket ship come into the chat. This is actually Eli's second time with us, so he deserves a rocket ship for sure, or multiple rocket ships. There we go. Thanks, Andy, for joining us. Holly, I see you. Kieran Chrysler, thank you. A lot of repeat visitors. So good to see. Let me see some new folks. Holly Hale, glad you're with us. Izzy, good to see you too. Thanks, Brendan, Nick. Nick, did we work together a long time ago? Maybe I'm thinking of another Nick. It's always fun to see when old coworkers like pop into the chat. So hi from Boston. There we go. Oh, Nick, yes, we did work together. Okay, great. Well, really great to see all of these folks coming in today. And so we have a really exciting topic, how to align content for users, especially as we think about LLMs and AEO. So let me formally introduce Eli. He is a growth advisor and strategic consultant, developed global SEO strategies for lots of major brands. And you may know him, a really great book, Product-Led SEO, the logic and theory behind SEO. So we talked a lot about product-led SEO a little bit last time, still really holds up quite well in the age of AI. And you kind of meant it to be that way, correct, Eli? Yeah.
Oops, I was on mute. Yep, sorry. I obviously predicted AI, and that's how I wrote about it. But yeah, just the user focus will really never get old. So yeah, obviously the tactics will change, and we'll dive into some of that. But if you're focused around users and around the search experience, I don't think it will be obsolete until like we're all plugged into Neuralink.
So an evergreen book for sure, and a lot of what we'll be talking about today as far as users go. So yeah, our agenda, how do we align content for users, especially with so many changes, building for users and what that means, and then a concept that Eli also writes a lot about, search market fit and what that also entails. Really great points on that. Then we are going to talk about AI attribution. I've got a few key questions at the end that I want to make sure Eli answers. And then we'll also dive into a Q&A. And so, yeah, so let's kick it off here. Let me set the scene a little bit because as we all know, things are changing quite rapidly. I feel like as I talk to advisors, SEO teams, a lot of people that we're hearing at AirOps, everyone's asking like, what do we do now that our clicks are vanishing, but we're seeing some changes in our impressions and things like that. And then we're seeing, of course, the rise of ChatGPT and other LLMs, AI mode, AI overviews, changing to AI mode. And you see this chart on the right. I mean, this was from a, these are huge sites, of course, like big news sites, but I think this trend's really hold up for all of us as we see organic searches falling here. And so from my perspective, a lot of content teams and SEO teams aren't quite ready. Eli, what are you kind of seeing about the current state of search and what's your take on some of these points?
So I think there's two things. Well, actually, let's go with a bunch of things. I'm not going to limit it to just two, so I can keep going on and on. The first thing is really there is reality, and then there's the hype cycle. So the reality is that clicks have been declining for a very long time, independent of AI mode. And this is like Google launched SGE with what's the original AI overviews over a year ago. So they launched at the beginning of, I think, 2024. And from there, we saw clicks start declining. And I actually think this is really a good thing. This is a good thing that clicks are declining, because a lot of that traffic should not have gone to the websites that were getting that traffic. So one of the things, anybody's been doing SEO for a really long time, they know about the idea of how the websites are ranking on things that have been replaced by knowledge graph results and rich answers, and that's good. So for example, if you Googled what time does the Super Bowl start, or what time is it in London right now, or anything that is structured and standardized and commoditized, if you had a website that was ranking on that, you didn't really deserve it, because that's a terrible user experience to force a user to go read a bunch of content to find out a simple answer. And the truth is for something like what time is it in London right now, that's a very bad experience, because you don't actually find out what time it is in London. You just learn about how the time in London is calculated based on wherever you might be. And that might be wherever who wrote that article is. So that's the first thing, is clicks have been declining as Google figured out how to use AI overviews and again, what they called search generative answers before. And then the clicks started declining from there. Now we're in a place where there's even more AI overviews because users like them. It's a better experience for users, may not be the best experience for Google just yet. The second thing is really the hype cycle around this. So AI overviews are causing clicks to decline. But the hype cycle is that all clicks are going to disappear because everyone's going to stop Googling. And I don't think that's anything close to true. There's all these data, the data comes out. So I think SimilarWeb has the best data on how many people are actually using ChatGPT. I am sure that most of the people that are actually using ChatGPT and not just saying they're using it are also still using Google. Even if they're not using Google search a ton, they're still using Gmail, they're still using Slides, they're still using Sheets, they're still using other Google products. They're probably even using Chrome. So they're still in the Google ecosystem. They're still going to be Googling. Then the third thing really around this hype cycle is that we get this idea of no, you're never going to see search visibility anymore. And you immediately need to start looking at AI. And I really don't think any of this is true. I think we're on a gradual down slope. And obviously clicks are disappearing. Obviously things are transitioning, but not nearly as fast as the hype cycle would have you think. And really we've been in this for about 2.5 years since ChatGPT came on the scene, and we're still Googling. We're still doing a lot of the same things. So I don't know where we're going to be in 3 years from now, but I'm almost certain at the end of 2025, it will look very, very much like what we do today. And probably at the end of 2026, it would be very much like what we do today. So there's not going to be this immediate one day we wake up and stop Googling. So I'm a little bit less concerned. And I think the day-to-day activities should still be focused on what we do, as long as you weren't focused on tactics that have already been obsolete.
I really like that last point there. As long as you're not focused on tactics that have been obsolete. That kind of brings me over to our next slide here, is just how do we think about aligning content for users? And so at AirOps, we recently did a study on AEO visibility, and we saw these kind of 5 elements really seem to influence things a lot. And if looking at these, just from my point of view, these aren't terribly different than what a lot of SEOs have been doing anyway. So we see good freshness signals, regularly updated content, easy readability and structure, formatted for snippet extractability, just thinking about the featured snippet and AI overview type mold there, having good evidence in your pieces and your blog post, and then aligning and talking about what your brand is about anyway. We can drop that link in the chat. It's our AEO report scorecard. But Eli, do any of these jump out at you, or maybe some that are important that you think for SEOs to focus on?
Yeah. So I think if you summed all this up into what the best way to do, and I don't really agree with this AEO term, it's just SEO. But if you summed all this up about what you should do to be visible in whatever AI platform, whether it's AI overviews or it's a competitor to Google, what you should do to be visible there, it really comes down to do good for users, create really good product, create really good user experiences. And that's what everyone should have been doing. Now, the problem has always been that there's the ideal, Google's create great content, and we always want to create great content. And then you look back and you see your competitors did not do that. They created terrible keyword stuffed content. They bought links. They did things that should not have been rewarded, and they are rewarded. And it tempts everyone to try to copy them. Big brands have always been at this disadvantage because they couldn't do the same thing. I've worked for brands where our competitors would go and, let's say, make a comparison and say, hey, here's us between you big, huge competitor. And the brand itself wouldn't want to do that because they said, we can't do that. It's not within our brand guidelines. There could be legal gray areas. So brands have been stuck. They haven't been able to do the same things that more nimble and smaller companies can do. And that wasn't necessarily fair because when users went to search, they were looking for the brand. They were looking for the brands that could support them. So as an example from my own searching, I was recently switching banks, and there's a lot of content that promotes certain banks online. So if I'm Googling like best bank for small business, best bank for travelers, or whatever sort of queries I'm looking for, you could, I hate using this as a verb, but I'm going to, you could SEO yourself to the top and become the best bank for whatever it is from a search standpoint. However, I've actually had the best experiences as a bank with Chase Bank, which is the least nimble, oldest, largest company in America. So does Chase deserve to be the best bank for whatever? Very, very possibly. But they can't do SEO in the same way that some bank that just raised $40 million and doesn't even have FDIC approval can do. Now, what changes is AI learns. So now if Chase can just do a really good job of being a Federal Reserve, too big to fail bank that has good customer service and does not game the system, right? They don't just focus on how do I get good Trustpilot reviews, but not actually being a good bank, which is what startups will do. They'll focus on the tactic. They'll focus on how do I get good reviews? How do I pay someone to get me good reviews rather than how do I just be really good so I get good reviews? So what changes is AI thinks. So the same way I, as a user, can go to a bank and try to experience what it's like to onboard, experience what it's like to be a customer in that bank, and then go to another bank and experience what's that's like. And from my initial assessments of the website, I can say, oh, this is a bank that I trust with my money. And this is a bank that I do not trust with my money. AI sort of doing the same thing. It's learning, feeling, and well, not necessarily feeling, but really thinking. And these signals, these are the signals that you're supposed to do, but where SEO got caught is they focused on the signals as tactics. So instead of saying, I'm going to have fresh content that's actually fresh, they're like, I will create a script that will update the date on my content every single day. Instead of saying, I will make sure I have really good content that's structured well and you can extract snippets from it, they're going to look at the tactic and say, what does the tool tell me makes it hit this score? Again, instead of being that really good product, really good content. So what should have always won in SEO will likely win today in this future paradigm of AI mixed with SEO. And I think that's good for users. Now, it does make it harder for startups to succeed because they can't game the system, but that's fair. That's exactly the way it always was offline. If you were starting a brand new bank in a brand new city, you couldn't, without money, suddenly become the best bank. You're chasing a bank that might have 50 years, 100 years, thousands of customers. You can't just, again, be the best unless you're the best. You have to earn it. But somehow when it came to search, somehow when it came to the internet, you didn't have to earn it. And again, I'm going to use a bad word I don't like. You can steal it. So by buying the best links, by stuffing the page, by making it look like you're the best, you can have people land on the page and convert because they thought it was the best. So I think this is all good for users. So the best thing to do in this future world is be good for users.
I really like that example of the bank because it just shows like your reputation really matters and how you like build your business on like some of the fundamentals really can translate over to some of these new visibility areas and surfaces. Let's kind of continue that here. Like, how do you build for users and agents? You kind of mentioned this a little bit as agents increasingly decide what they read and what's kind of consumed. And then how do we really move from what you were mentioning, like that generic kind of keyword stuffing to targeting actual problems?
So I think again, the thing here is that this is it's a gradual shift. It's not an overnight like, oh, I no longer have to do anything because agents do it for me. The same way, there are many, many things that we do on the internet, we never conceived that we'd be doing them today. So for example, my kids asked me what kind of cell phone I had when I was their age. Obviously, I didn't have a cell phone. These things didn't exist. And if you look at what your phones can do today, we didn't imagine they'd be able to do that 5 years ago and 10 years ago. So there's been this gradual shift. I'm sure the same thing will happen with agents. We're not suddenly going to give all of our shopping over to AI agents. We're not suddenly going to give over all of our travel booking to AI agents. There will be experiences that will be like, oh, wow, this is a little bit better. I can put in what I'm looking for. And it will go in and add things to my cart, but I'm still going to have to decide. This means that it's a experience shift, it's a paradigm shift, but it's not like a 180-degree turn. So looking at it from an SEO standpoint, there were things that we did many years ago that worked, but gradually shifted away. So e-commerce sites, if you look at like Amazon's site from 10 years ago, none of us would ever trust that site with a credit card today because that's not the way it should work. It looks ugly. The carts aren't good. We're not really sure what's prime. But now we have this clean experience that we gradually got used to. So I don't think there's anything you suddenly have to get ready for. Agents will come in the picture, but agents won't always be in the picture. So the things that agents will end up doing are probably the things that humans should not have been doing before. And this will be an improvement. This will be an efficiency improvement to the way people are doing stuff. But that means that the consumers are doing something else. So if you're doing SEO, you now have to focus on two things. You have to focus on the agent and the user. So focusing on the agent might mean, and I don't know if we have a slide on this, but we have to really drive this thing home, which is SEO will always exist. And the reason is, unless we're in a world, like I said earlier, that Neuralink is controlling us, where you wake up in the morning, you do nothing. Like imagine how good that world would be, the Matrix, where like you don't go to work, your agent goes to work. You don't even cash the money that comes in for the work you've done, the agent does. You don't spend the money, your agent does, right? I don't think we'll ever be in that world. We're in a world where we make decisions. Now, if we have agents going to do all of our work for us, then we're free to go and do more stuff and have more fun. And we need to make decisions about the kind of fun we do. We don't have agents won't have fun for us. Agents aren't going to go watch movies for us. Agents aren't going to go to sports games. Agents aren't going to sit on the beach, right? So all those things, we either do them ourselves because we have more time, or we'll have to do work, which, if agents can do your work, then who needs, why should anybody be paid? So SEO will exist because SEO is the process of making whatever it is, whether it's a website, a product, a service, a company, a local page, visible to the search user. That search user might become an agent. And if there's an agent, there will be rules around how to make that visible to the agent. Now, who's going to make it visible for the agent? The person that has the job title of SEO. That's not going to go to social media. That's not going to go to product. That's not going to go to paid, of course, because some of this is going to be organic. That is the job of SEO. That is not the job of SEO today because agents don't exist. But this will be the job of SEO. So if you want to be successful in SEO, you need to transform, you need to adapt. And again, not overnight. You need to start learning these things and how to do SEO for agents. There will be rules. We don't know the rules yet. Same goes for the consumer. In that world, the consumer will be doing different things. The consumer will still be using the internet. And in fact, I think the consumer will be using even more things because of all the interfaces that are coming out because of AI. So Google and Apple's been launching this for a while, and Meta, there's glasses where now instead of being forced to use the internet when you're on a computer or sort of in your car and certainly on your phone, you now have another interface, which is the glasses, or there's watches, and there will be other things that come out. So there's more opportunities to search and more opportunities to discover. So yes, maybe it won't always be search, but it's another surface that people will be searching on. So I think search will actually grow as we have all these different surfaces. And maybe it's not ideal. Maybe it's not ideal for our mental health that there are all these surfaces, but they will be there. So I think SEO will always exist. I think if you're doing SEO for agents, that will be a different process. Again, that doesn't necessarily exist today, but the consumer aspect to this will always exist.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there is, I mean, I know as like SEOs, we kind of have been focused on like, let's just call it honestly, like on Google search results, but it seems like we might have some more search channels kind of emerge in this new atmosphere where we have maybe multiple channels that we're now like responsible for rather than just like the single browser search experience.
Yeah. I think the job of SEO is even more important because the job of SEO when I first started was like, figure out how to get number one on Google. It's a very simple
Right.
KPI. And then sometimes you would be like, oh, I'll figure out how to get number one on Bing also, but not many people have that KPI. But now it really fragments. So
Mhm.
it becomes, as a law firm, how do you figure out how to get more people to find me on Google My Business? That's local. How do you get more people to find me on our generic content, right? That's regular SEO. How do you get more people to recognize our business when they walk by, when they're wearing glasses? How do you get more people to navigate with their self-driving car? Again, we're not there yet, but these are all the directions we'll go. So the job becomes much more difficult and much more valuable because of all these touch points. Whereas years ago, it was just, well, you're good at Google, you're good at SEO. And now there are all these different functions that you have to be good at. And maybe it breaks down. Maybe there becomes an SEO for cars and an SEO for glasses and an SEO for, I actually have
Mm.
a screen on my refrigerator that's larger than any desktop computer I've ever had. And that's another search interface. And maybe there are agents in the future that will do your food ordering for you. So that, again, is an SEO aspect. Like, how do I make sure that the Samsung refrigerators discover my e-commerce and discover my food products, that my product, which is totally commoditized, and that's exactly where SEO shines. Like, when the same product can be bought from many, many different websites, you want to do SEO. So it is bought from your website. So there's so many more ways that SEO will be done. So I just feel extremely confident in the future of this job. The future of this job will absolutely change. You know, again, when I first started in SEO, a lot of this job consisted of, and I'm curious to see who'll throw this in the comments, but I I spent more of my day job buying links and negotiating link buys than doing any technical SEO. The technical SEOs did it odd and every once in a while, but I was actually probably more of a media buyer. Just the media I bought happened to have been for SEO, and then I measured my rankings based on that. And I spent a lot of time reporting on rankings, which were more volatile than they are today. Today, you'll get a ranking and nothing will really change no matter what you do. And back then,
Right.
it could change. And there was a reason to report on it because that's what everyone focused on. That job changed. Today's job will change. And this job will always be there.
Okay, everyone, write that down. Your job will become more valuable. I mean, I think that's that's a really good message for a lot of SEOs on the call to hear. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you're seeing visibility work now. And one topic that I know you've written a lot about is just search market fit. And do you see that changing at all with the LLMs and some of these different surfaces that we've already mentioned?
Yeah, so that goes back to like the original thing I was talking about, where a lot of search is and will be disrupted by knowledge graph and now AI overviews. And that's where there isn't search market fit, because that is super top of the funnel. So what SEO always focused on is whatever was at the most, you know, again, the highest point of the funnel, because that's where the most traffic was. So at the job where I spent a significant part of my day buying links, it was an automotive media company. And one of the keywords we focused on was the word cars. So we ranked in the top 10. You know, we varied between, you know, position 7 and position 6 for cars. And we sold cars. Like, we monetized by having people go to auto dealer websites, or we monetized with ads where people were going to go to auto dealer websites. I cannot imagine that today anybody looking to buy a car would begin any query with that word.
Hmm.
You don't just go and say, I Googled cars, let's see what comes up. And, you know, I'll spend $50,000 on wherever this takes me. That's not going to happen. That's top of funnel. And that's where people focused. They always focused on top of funnel because that's, again, where the most search volume was. Winning on that meant you got a lot of clicks. Winning on that meant you had a nice report to share about this, you know, extremely difficult keyword. We're the top 5. That changes. So for the product I was optimizing for, there was no search market fit for that keyword. And what that means is there was no end result. There shouldn't be any
Hmm.
end result where anyone buys a car. Now, that's for that keyword. There are obviously many keywords that we deserved and we did focus on, and we generated a lot of revenue from. There are many products that shouldn't really be focusing on SEO at all, because if you play through that entire journey of what's supposed to happen, someone's going to type this keyword into their phone, and then they're going to see our ranking result, and then they're going to be informed, and then they're going to put their phone back in their pocket. So if it's a company selling a product or a service, if they put the phone back in the pocket, all that SEO effort and money was for nothing, mostly for
Hmm.
nothing. And that could have been better spent somewhere else. Should they do SEO? Well, it would be weighted on what the ROI might be. So if they're spending $10,000 a month, which is something I frequently see where there are companies that don't really have search market fit spending $10,000 a month, they're not going to generate that level of ROI. And that $10,000 might have been better spent on another channel. One common one I see is SaaS tools that only function to do one thing. So let's say they do some sort of script and analytics in Google Sheets, and they'll spend thousands of dollars per month to try to be visible for one or two keywords. And that's the only thing they do. They do some sort of script in Google Sheets. That money could have been far better spent on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on Meta, on Google Ads, just targeting their exact interest set. Maybe it's expensive. Maybe on LinkedIn, they are paying $100 per click. But from that $100 per click, they'll have a conversion rate. Whereas they may be doing all of that effort to rank on whatever their analytics keyword is going to be, drive a lot of readers, but not drive a lot of conversions. And they may not even know that they're not driving conversions for many months because their SEO agency told them it takes 6 to 12 months to see any results. So they don't get there. Again, in that case, the way I decide if there's search market fit is by playing that journey forward. Like, who's supposed to Google? What does that person expect to see at the other end of that? And how much money do we think we're going to make? And if there's any sort of, well, we're not really sure, we hope they're going to do that, I might veer away from it and not want to invest in it.
That's a really good point. I mean, the next slide here is about attribution. So kind of as we do think about, yes, we do have search market fit. We had search market fit, but how do we like still attribute, and how do we, think about our metrics now, especially as CMOs, COOs, CEOs are asking like, what are we going to do? How do we attribute all of this spend? What are you kind of telling teams as we're seeing AI mode, AI overviews, and LLMs really change?
So again, this comes down to telling the story. And I fear that many SEO teams do not know how to tell the story of this buyer's journey. So they throw their hands up when suddenly they don't have analytics and they can't explain it. And I think in those cases, the analytics and the attribution they did have from Search Console, they didn't really support the story. They just relied on the number. And that was it. They're like, look, we got this many clicks. What did those clicks do? Well, we're not really sure, because that's where the attribution breaks. I think if you can tell the story and you can show the visibility in AI mode, and I think it's very difficult to really tell the AI story and the visibility on AI, because the way most tools are approaching this is they're coming up with queries that should potentially be used by users, but they're not actually the queries used by users. So they may not be a leading metric towards anything at all. They're just sort of a ranking without any idea whether people actually search it. I know that the queries that I have seen in these dashboards are not queries I would use if I was actually doing an AI query. AI queries are incredibly long and really detailed. And they're also very individualized. And going back to your prior slide, they need to be, if you're trying to come up with these, they need to be bundled around topical intent. So it doesn't really matter whether someone says, I'm a 36-year-old female, I drive a Toyota Prius, and I'm looking for a new car that is very much like a Toyota Prius, and plugs in all that context. Or someone writes, I'm a 75-year-old male and I'm looking for a hybrid, right? Again, it's the same topical intent. So then you want to be visible as the authority website that talks about that vehicle. You don't have to be very specific to that person. But I don't think most people are going there. I think they're going there on the way they always used to do rankings, which is, I'm visible on AI for this thing. So on this problem of losing attribution, if you can tell the story, you can explain the visibility of how it leads to the end result. Because I think SEO hasn't had really good attribution for a really long time, especially if you focused on top of funnel keywords. And again, depending on the product, it could take, if it's e-commerce, maybe top of funnel, you convert it in that first 30 minutes. But if it's SaaS, maybe you didn't convert for 90 days. So there's no way you had any sort of attribution. So the challenge is that you need to become a better storyteller than a better data analyst. And most SEO is not really good at telling the story because they've been focused only on the data. And I think that the C-suite, and from my experience of explaining this to the C-suite will understand and they'll buy it. Not like we're not selling something wrong. They'll buy it, say, look, this is how we're visible for this thing in the top of the funnel. We are not converting from here. But if someone's like, going back to my bank example, if someone's looking for the top business banks and we're a startup and we show up there, we are not going to convert there. People don't choose their bank where they're going to trust their money off of an AI overview. But the visibility does create that awareness, and that journey then begins somewhere else. That journey has to end up on a website because I can't open or fund a new bank account from an AI overview. That does go to a website. So instead of saying, well, I've lost all my keywords on Best Business Bank, which you probably didn't convert on anyways, the AI mode, it now takes over for what might have been a Forbes article or what might have been a G2 page or any sort of aggregator. AI mode becomes the aggregator. The visibility, again, might not be tracked. You can do anecdotal visibility on your own. The clicks probably can't be tracked. But again, if you can tell that story of like, look, we're visible in the right places. It's just like being visible in an article in Forbes, in an article in Fortune, and that's good for the business. Again, I think SEO needs to learn more about storytelling, less about super granular data that probably didn't connect as well to conversions as we claimed it did.
Do you think impressions, for example, is like a good substitute for that like brand awareness or that influence level as far as like equating that to almost like a billboard or the Forbes article example?
Again, if it's applied to a story. So
Mm.
SEO has always used focused in on the wrong tactic of like, oh, look, here's how many impressions I got. Well, impressions really need to be subdivided by where you got that impression. So like you can get impressions, you can get lots of eyeballs if you did TV ads and you ran it on Roku in the middle of the night. Or you can get lots of eyeballs, or you can get very few eyeballs if you ran a TV ad during a very tight game where everyone's watching towards the end. So where the eyeballs matter, where the eyeballs are matter. And I think that's where like just saying, oh, I've gotten lots of impressions off of AI is not a good metric. It has to be, I got a lot of metrics off of people that were interested in this service for startups. The impressions matter on the right place, but just impressions on its own, I don't think that's a good metric. It has to be accompanying a story.
Yeah, really good points. We had a question come in that I think it's worth addressing now because we had talked a little bit about topical authority, and this question was talking about like how do we establish topical authority if we're not appearing in like top of the funnel type places or writing that type of content anymore. How do you think about that balancing out that top of funnel to establish topical authority so you do appear for those queries later on that you want those decision and bottom of the funnel queries?
So I think the most important thing when it comes to really thinking about the direction of AI is to take a step back and think that AI wants to, I mean, the word is artificial intelligence. It wants to be like a human. So if I were a human and there was no internet, so again, I'm going to keep using my bank example because I think it's applicable. So if I were a human and I was making a decision about the best bank 20 years ago, the best bank I should go and trust with my business and trust with my money, I would ask my friends. I would read articles potentially in the local newspaper. I would pick up the physical newspaper and see how often that's referenced. I'd probably reach out to people I trust and, again, not my friends, but not word of mouth, but proactively asking them the question. So that's what AI is looking for. They're looking for all of those signals about these are the right people, these are the right places. So PR plays a huge role. And I would say influencers play a huge role. But again, the problem with the internet is every time something seems to work for success and for visibility, it gets gamed. So if AI were to start looking at influencers, well, all of a sudden influencers would be renting out their authority faster than ever. If AI would start looking at Reddit, which it does, now we have agencies popping up that help stuff Reddit full of validation and references to companies. So that is always going to be the problem. It's always going to be whack-a-mole, but it's better whack-a-mole than it was with Google search, because there have been things with traditional Google search where Google itself has been aware of things that should not be ranking in Google. So for example, I had an engineer friend at Google, and I would always ask him about Forbes. I'm like, what are you doing about Forbes? Like, why does it rank on everything? And they're like, and he would just groan and say, we know. And for years they were doing it, but they would write algorithms, and it's really hard to decide when are they like, how is that algorithm going to hurt Forbes? And they've tried multiple times, and even helpful content didn't do whatever they thought it would do to Forbes. But AI is different because AI can learn. It can say, well, these are the signals. We can't really articulate those signals, but we can, like, again, pattern match this. We should no longer trust this Reddit account. We should no longer trust this influencer. We should no longer trust this geographic area. This is the best bank for this kind of person, but not the best bank for that kind of person. So it learns. So it gets much harder to game. But I think that really is the future of everything around AI is that it thinks like humans. So if you want to do a really good job of creating topical authority and being the best at what you're ever supposed to be the best at, be the best at it. Like, do what you would do if you were offline. Like, if you wanted to be the best pizza shop in a neighborhood, well, one shortcut on the internet would be to like do whatever you can that you show up in the map pack when people search best pizza shop near me, and that's it. You're the best pizza shop. But if your pizza sucked, that wasn't fair. So if you actually want to be the best pizza shop, well, how do you do that? You get the right influencers to come in. You do all those offline things and you actually make really good pizza. So the answer is you have to deserve to be that topical authority and then do the things that create awareness of the topical authority. There's no like hack of like, I've convinced AI mode that I'm the topical authority, but offline, everyone thinks I'm not.
Yeah, and maybe to bring it home a little bit for, I know a lot of people here work for like SaaS brands and stuff. That is really showing your expertise like on the topic. So if it is like, what is a CRM? Like bring in your expertise with that, bring in customer interviews and quotes, bring in data and research, bring in examples of your product, like really solving that problem to show that you are a topical authority or, authority and expert in that area, and not just try to like game the system, to use some of what Eli is saying there, but really show your authority on these type of pieces.
Yeah, I really think that it helps to have that offline approach of like, and what would I do if the internet didn't exist? And I think that's the advantage and disadvantage of AI, that the shortcuts have disappeared. And the advantage is that when we're not wearing our marketing hat, when we're not wearing our SEO hat, the world is a better place. It's an easier world to navigate and find the right things.
Yeah, love that. I'm going to take a quick break here. At AirOps, we do want you to have your content ready for users and agents. And so we have some content refresh packages that include an AEO scorecard. Some of that I shared a little bit earlier, a custom plan to help you optimize and align your content for users. And then this includes a plan to audit, brief, and refresh your content. So feel free to use that QR code there to take advantage of that. We got 20 that we can help people with today, or feel free to email us at the bottom, growth@airops.com, and we will get you all set up. We'll have a little bit more on that later, but let's go ahead and go to our some of our key topics here. So here's some questions I know that people have. What is your process for keeping your content up to date and aligned for users? We have a graph here in our recent research where we saw companies that optimized and updated their content every quarter really did see more visibility and results in LLM. So what's your process for keeping content aligned to users and up to date?
So I don't really lean in on tactics that everyone else seems to be using. So like I wouldn't look at a study and say, oh, we should do this because, what's your number there?
Every 3 months we saw,
No,
like if you updated your content.
Oh, the smaller number. Okay. The citation desert. So I wouldn't lean in
Oh,
on that and tell a client like, oh, you're in the citation desert. I would lean in from a user standpoint and say, from a user standpoint, this is no longer up to date. And again, I think that's what AI is looking for. It's looking at all of those signals at what should be said here. And it's not really about the content. Like you can game the date and then just change the date. It's really about, is it fresh? Is it saying the right things? And are you in line with what everyone else in that entire space is doing? And that's pattern matching. And the same way, again, we as humans, you read a piece of content and you're like, oh, that's not valid anymore. I just don't think that's accurate. Where it talks about like, I don't know, the best TV to buy. And you're like, I don't think that's not a new feature anymore. No one would buy a TV with that feature. Again, AI is pattern matching and understanding what's new and what's old. So stay up to date. That is, you're up to date for users rather than stay up to date because of some, other metric of like, this is the timeline that you need to be on. If you're in a space that doesn't change, then you don't need to update frequently. If you're in a space that changes frequently, then you have to up to date more frequently than anybody else. So that's I would base it completely on users.
yeah. And if you're in a fast changing industry where you have like a lot of regulations or something change quite frequently, then you'd be more incentivized to update because things are changing and the user needs to know that up-to-date info.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like doing stock prices, then you need to update every hour. If you're doing I don't know, statistics around history, if you want I don't know, any up-to-date information about World War I, then you probably never need to update.
Good note there. What is an action plan on changing content strategy for how people search now? What are you kind of suggesting to your clients and some of the people that you consult with? This chart on the right is from SEMrush, and it's just showing that keywords with AI overviews have kind of like remained steady at this like 40% or so since the spring. And so we're seeing zero click stay. It's definitely here to stay. So how are you kind of advising next steps for clients?
So I'm probably going to sound like a broken record. It totally depends on the users. And one of the big things that I've seen with leaders who are panicking about how to do SEO in this changing future is that there's a way that they judge SEO, and then there's a way that they behave when they do searches themselves. And again, part of the hype cycle around VC investors, like, you would think these VCs never used Google on their own. Like, they're suddenly like, oh, wow, all of Google's disappearing and all of these tools are disappearing and we need to find the new tools, but they Google. So like,
Mhm.
the way I would recommend anyone approach your searching is take off your SEO hat and then search, and then explain to me where in this funnel you would go do it. I think I wrote a post a few weeks ago on, really on my newsletter, product.seo.com, on like focusing on mid-funnel search.
Mhm.
That's where, if you take off your SEO hat, you see that's where you want to go to a website. Like, top of funnel, you're searching for something. In many cases, if AI overviews has done a good job, and that's why it's remained steady, is because Google's balancing between when they think they can do a good job and when they also want to hurt their revenue. If AI overviews has done a good job, then you go somewhere else in the journey to continue your searching, and you always have to end up on a website, unless you're in a space where the only thing people are looking for is content. It gets more challenging if you've monetized with ad impressions. That is certainly a problem. But if you are like Amazon, I don't think Amazon is going to be disrupted by AI overviews. They're the number one e-commerce site in the entire
Mhm.
world. You still have to buy from Amazon, and it doesn't really matter whether they surface in the top or not, because if you look at it, the way that journey works, you're going to say, I need let's do something more complex. I need a new mic for podcasting. So you put that
Mhm.
into let's even go with an AI search. I am a weekly podcaster. I have a budget of $80 to $500. I'd like a new podcast mic. I want it to only weigh 2 pounds. I want to be able to pack it with me. Like, you put all that context in. Does Amazon show up? Maybe, maybe not, but doesn't really matter, because then you narrow it down to the products you want. Then you start doing what becomes mid-funnel search, which is, I type in, I don't know, like Shure M7 versus Blue Yeti. That becomes a very specific mid-funnel search. And then the final search is Shure M7 prices. So you're likely going to have an B&H photo showing up. You're going to have Target showing up. You're going to have Amazon showing up. And where are you ultimately going to decide where to buy that microphone? It's not going to be on who's ranking number one. It's going to be on, oh, if I buy this from Amazon, I know I can return it within 30 days. Oh, if I buy it from Target, I may have to pay shipping. If I buy it from B&H, I may not have to pay taxes. Like, that's where it all calculates in. It's not where you're ranking, it's this journey. So my action plan for how people search is to be a searcher, and then try to visualize that journey in how that should actually work.
Yeah, I love those points too about there's still some advantage at the middle funnel and the bottom of the funnel to really help users in that journey, because the AI overviews is not going to necessarily provide that too. Um, and then how should brands kind of balance prioritizing updating content versus creating new content? I mean, I know we've hit on that. If you could just give us a couple minutes on that.
Yeah. So the focus should not be on the content. The focus should be on what you intend to do with that content.
Mm,
So you need to create new content if you don't have any of that mid-funnel content available. You don't need to update content if you suddenly discover that your content is no longer valid. So if you've written an article about best podcasting mics, I would update the content if there's a new model that you should put in there. But if you've discovered that best podcasting mics is probably going to be an AI search, it's probably like the article best podcasting mics is something that everyone in the audio space, everyone in the podcasting space has probably written, because they've found it on SEMrush, and they're like, these are top keywords for this space to drive content. And most of those sites, they don't monetize with ad impressions, they monetize with affiliate clicks. So
Mm.
if people are looking at best podcasting mics, they're not ready to convert. They're not really getting that many affiliate clicks anyways. But if you can do that comparison, that mid-funnel comparison, maybe that's where you'll get more affiliate clicks. If you do that bottom of funnel, like what are the accessories you need to buy for your new microphone? That's super bottom of funnel. So I would look at where you're going to make the most revenue. And that's how I prioritize. Like, can I leave my old article up if it's not really updated? And if no one's clicking it, sure. Should I write new articles if now there's a new place in the mid funnel that users are going to be going to and I don't yet have? That's where I prioritize.
Love that framework. We are going to talk about a couple brands now. Nicole and our team is going to chat about some good results that we've seen with content refresh, and some of that is updates.
All right, thank you. Nicole here, product marketing at AirOps. So we've already had some incredible customers, some of whom are on this webinar today, who have been seeing some great results with content refresh, which is our solution for what's been talked about on this webinar. So in just 30 days, Dscript was able to see an 123% increase in organic visits to that refresh blog content, similar to what Eli was just speaking about. Lightspeed saw a 37% increase in conversion in just 30 days. And Webflow saw a 40% traffic increase in just days. So how did they do this? Content refresh, getting under the hood. We start with an audit, which takes your URLs and evaluates how well a page performs with both agents and search engines by scoring for things that we just talked about in this webinar, which is going to be freshness, authority, and structure signals. Once that scoring is complete, we generate content briefs with our rewrite recommendations that are proven to boost both agent citations, incredibly important, outperform your SERP competitors, which SEO is still absolutely crucial, and strengthen your brand consistency across your brand. So while we're doing all these things for AEO and SEO, we're maintaining that unique brand tone and voice. Once you've given the human approval on these recommendations, keeping that human component in the loop, these content briefs are then fed into an automated high precision rewrite workflow that boosts your content citations, rankings, and competitiveness so that you can see the results like these brands Dscript, Lightspeed, and Webflow have seen. One of the reasons, if you noticed just a minute ago, I spoke about how these brands were able to see these results in 30 days with Webflow in just a couple of days. One of the reasons that they love AirOps is the time to value. So they're able to do this in less than 2 weeks without any of that additional developer lift. AirOps plugs right into your CMS and your entire analytics tech stack, and then boom, done, you're able to see some of those results. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. Awesome. So I'm going to talk just really quickly about one use case in further detail. So the whole point of this webinar, search is changing more in the next couple of months than it has in 10 years, very similar to what Sung says in his quote there on the right-hand side. Dscript recognized this, got ahead of this, did a phenomenal job. And in under a month, they were able to hit an all-time high of 28% LLM visibility. In addition to this, they saw over an 151% increase in year-over-year signups, 35% of that happening in the first 30 days. So this increase in organic traffic and LLM visibility has directly contributed to their subscription performance, their overall revenue, while allowing them to take action in this new world of search by adapting their existing content to meet the criteria that these agents are looking for. Phenomenal. So what can you do? All right, well, you can scan this really fancy QR code, hop on a call with us, as Josh has already mentioned. We'll discuss that custom plan to get your content refreshed, which will include really cool things like our personalized AEO scorecard. We have the public-facing version, which we've dropped in the chat earlier. I'll go ahead and drop that again for you guys if you want to check that out. Hopefully we get the chance to speak with you, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to Josh for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks. Be sure and drop your questions into the chat. We'll do some Q&A now. One question that came up from Marvin, really appreciate it. How do you recommend allocating your content resources in different parts of the funnel? Is it 30% awareness, 40% middle funnel? Like, where do you kind of think about allocating budgets?
So the main thing is really to prioritize based on outcome. So if you can assess the outcome, again, like I think most companies can have hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content. So like in each piece of content, each effort, in each project you're working on, if you would outline what the outcome is going to be, like, is this going to be something that's going to drive awareness? How likely is it to drive awareness? I have a post on my newsletter from really, really long ago, so I need to update it, on using RICE to update, to like really decide on how you should be doing any effort across SEO. So you're doing reach, impact, confidence, and effort. Check out that post so I don't have to go through the whole thing. But anything you're doing in your project roadmap, you should say what's going to happen with this. So there may be content where you say you're going to drive awareness, but then you don't think it's going to drive awareness. That would be less important than a piece of content that you think is going to drive conversions and you're pretty confident will drive conversions. And then you just keep this continuous, like, back burner and front focus on what you're doing based on all of these projections on where you're going to get outcomes.
Yeah, love that. What is your take on, we had a question come in from Valentin. What is your take on like link building and how that is kind of affecting LLMs and Google AI mode as well?
I think most link building has been obsolete for a very long time. So in most of my testing, link building from many sites didn't work at all because they were sites that we as humans would look at and say, oh, wow, that's totally fake. This is a guest post site. When I published my book, I worked with a PR agency who bought links for me. They claimed they bought PR. One of these websites had like 60 letters in their URL. And I'm like, you can't tell me this is actually PR. No one goes to this website. Like, this book review is totally fake. So that was what link building has become. Where link building is successful is when you can create relationships with actual media that's trusted. It doesn't really matter whether you pay them. Google says you can't pay someone, but it doesn't really matter. Like, if money changes hands, if a journalist is willing to write about you on a site that is reputable, and that's what people trust. So I think that's what that sort of link building has been obsolete for a long time. They're just guest posting on sites that have domain authority, but no one actually reads. Link building in the future becomes more about PR, more about awareness. And I think it becomes more flexible, that influencers matter in link building. So, it doesn't have to just be websites. It could also be a Reddit account. It could also be an Instagram account. It could also be an X account. And like, having that sort of engagement lends to the visibility and the brand perception of the site.
Yeah. That's really good points about digital PR. I was at SEO week and they were talking a lot about that too. Maybe taking a step up. I've been on SEO teams where we've had like link builders, outreach, technical SEO person, a content strategist, all of these different things. How are you advising people and clients these days, maybe rethinking their content and SEO org? Like, what roles are you seeing are still important? What focuses should they have as some of these new areas have come up?
So I started by saying I think SEO will always exist, but I am very fearful for many SEO managers of today because they are trying their best to maintain what they thought used to work a year ago. So technical SEO, I think that becomes less important than it was in the past. And I see SEO teams pumping these things out about like, this is how broken our technical site is. And I think you can get engineers to fix things, but you have a short amount of time where they're like, okay, we put 6 months of resources in this. What did we get from it? Did it change our traffic? And our traffic's actually going down. So what have you done? So I think the SEO roles of the future really have to adapt and they have to change into the things that are most effective. But again, I'm afraid that most SEO managers I see today are trying to hold on to the old way of doing SEO. SEO with like doing PR for SEO is so much harder than going on a link buying marketplace and just buying links. Doing like strategic SEO and coming up with a 12-month roadmap on how you're going to pivot your product to be more visible and your content roadmap to be more mid-funnel is so much harder than going to SEMrush and outputting, a bunch of keywords and creating a content brief in AI. Like, SEO is hard, and it had become easy because it had become something where you can just phone it in, and it can't be. So what I'm actually seeing is SEO roles being cut because they can't demonstrate their value. Again, I just wrote about this post. I wrote this morning about transparency in SEO. The transparency in SEO, we've always really hid behind there's a black box. And the black box, not only has it been opened, but no one cares about it anymore. Like if you just look at Google, Google has always maintained how important their relationship with the SEO community is. And I don't think they're investing in it as much anymore because they don't care, right? So like there will always be an SEO, but that job changes and we have to adapt that job. And the SEO managers that maintain, that the old things work, you may be able to keep that going for a while, but it won't last. It can't last.
Are you seeing the need to be like more collaborative, maybe across like content teams, or, bigger orgs have like PR teams as well? Are you seeing those things kind of like come together a little bit?
More strategic, more aligned with the business. So there's an increased scrutiny. We've had scrutiny on SEO like never before because you now have the media talking about the death of SEO. So if the media is talking about the death of SEO and how no one Googles anymore, I think it's prudent for the C-suite to say like, hey, are you guys dead? Do we even need you? Should we lay you off? Like, I think that's what's happening. And it's not just about collaboration. It's everything. Be strategic, be in line with the business. Like if the business is, doing has one KPI and your KPI is rankings or your KPI is AI visibility and you can't track it through to conversion, that's not good.
And as we think about aligning content for users, I know one of your big talking points is working with the product team along with SEO and building some of that out. At AirOps, we have this like position that we talked a lot about content engineering, which is like setting up some of these workflows to really stitch processes together. How are you seeing SEO teams need to work with like the product teams?
Oh, I mean, I always thought SEO teams need to work with the product teams. The product teams are creating experiences for users, and SEO was creating experiences for search engines and experiences for traffic. But if you align them together, if the SEO managers are product managers, the experiences they create for users are also experiences that have best practices for search engines and best practices for search users. So I think those will align. And I think if SEO teams get obliterated within a company, the product managers will take on that SEO function. Like part of their job will be making sure there's search visibility. Again, there will always be search. There will always be SEO. I want the SEOs of today to adapt and become that SEO of the future rather than their jobs and their abilities becoming obsolete and someone else within the company doing that job.
Yeah, love that. We had a question come in. I'm going to reframe it a little bit, but it was about like the importance of like technical SEO versus just kind of like content. How are you seeing that balance out, especially in some of these new search services and LLMs too?
So again, I think technical SEO is less important because years ago, Google required good technical SEO because they didn't have the capabilities to fully understand a website. And I saw the question from Sati about like a XML sitemap. So XML sitemaps were an aid to Google because they didn't know how big a site was. They didn't know what to crawl anymore, like when they saw a site. Now Google doesn't necessarily need it because they have those crawling capabilities. And I'll lean into Google because I think Google wins this because they've been doing it for 25 years. ChatGPT just does not have 25 years of crawling and ingesting the web. They could figure it out, but I still think Google wins it. I think a lot of the things that technical SEO did were to support inefficiencies and things that Google couldn't necessarily do. And I think Google has surpassed that. I think Google has solved for that. They will decide what to solve for based on money. So like rendering JavaScript, it's more expensive than rendering HTML, but they could render JavaScript. Do they render JavaScript? Again, they're basing that decision on whether they want to spend it. Crawl budget, I mean, they could infinitely crawl any sort of site, but it's not crawl budget for a website. It's more like, does Google want to spend infinite resources on crawling a site? So a lot of the things that technical SEO did supported Google not being capable of doing everything on their own. And I think Google has reached a level where they are capable. So if a site doesn't have good internal linking structure, Google can actually see that relationship between the pages because they're reading the content. They could read the references. They don't need to frequently crawl a page to know that it's an authoritative page. So technical SEO, I think, does decline as we see less outcomes from the inputs of technical SEO.
And then I know one last question here from Valentin. Thank you. And what are you thinking about informational websites and media?
I don't want to close on a downer. So you have to make sure you ask me one more question. I feel for informational websites. I think informational websites may not make it into the future. A lot of the information they produce, whether it's product reviews, will be taken over by Google, by AI overviews. If it's news informational sites where like the news is gathered on the ground, that's totally different, but they're being disrupted by X and other social media platforms. So I feel very strongly for those sites that they may need to adapt into something that is more proprietary that can't be stolen from them. But now let's ask a happy question that you can close.
Okay, so we're gonna take this away. All these SEOs and content people are on the call. They're gonna say, "Hey, what did we talk about at that webinar? What are like the 3 core takeaways that these SEO leaders can take to their CMO to be like, here's what we need to do, here's where things are going."
So number 1, SEO is not dying. SEO will always be here in the future. Number 2, you need a raise because your job is more important than ever. And number 3 is if you want to deserve that raise, you need to be as transparent as possible in explaining the value you add and why it's so important. I don't think SEO ever disappears. I don't know the exact percentage of revenue driven by SEO. So let's call it 50% versus all those other channels. I'm sure it's always going to stay around the same way. Like advertising doesn't exist if there's not organic. So I'm certain that SEO will exist. Explain that story as transparently as possible and ask for that raise.
Wow, love that. Everyone's job is still important. You still have lots to do, maybe a little bit harder than before, which is what we talked a lot about on this call. Eli, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Great to hear. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Yeah, everyone else, we'll see you soon. Join us in a couple weeks. We're gonna have Ross Simmons on. He's gonna be talking about Reddit and how you can use that. He's really big on repurposing and redistribution, so it'll be a great call too. Eli, thanks again. Everyone, we'll talk soon. Thanks.